The second reading is taken from Job 1, Job chapter 1, verse 1, and Job chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. In the land of Oz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. On another day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming through the earth, going back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason." "Skin for skin," Satan replied. "A man will give all he has for his own life. But now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it, and he sat among the ashes. His wife said to him, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." Job replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we only accept the good from God and not trouble?" In all of this, Job did not sin in what he said. The words of our Lord. Thanks be to God.
Grant Kerr, you remember Grant Kerr? So I only heard him speak once, and it was at a funeral. And was he a little dramatic at times?
Oh, really?
Because what I remember, what sticks out in my mind is that it was a funeral for a middle-aged man. He was in his 40s. And Grant opened the service by saying, "There's one question everyone wants to ask God today." And he shouted, "Why?" Does that sound like Grant?
Yeah.
Okay. Which brings us to the book of Job in the Old Testament. On one hand, the book of Job is to cry out to God in the face of human suffering and asking, why? Why do people die too young? Why is there so much suffering and wrong in the world? Why? How do we make sense of this world in October 2024 when this week a 31-year-old woman stabbed somebody in Toronto and someone in Niagara Falls and someone in Hamilton? She didn't even know two of the people. How do you explain that? Where's the rational answer to that? The first chapter of Job almost sounds like God and Satan are a couple of buddies, playing a little bit of one-upmanship. And you have to know that Satan isn't an actual name, it's a title. It means something like crown attorney or district attorney or prosecuting lawyer. It's the title for someone who lays charges and then pursues prosecution for a conviction. So God says to Satan, like he's getting a bit of a dig in, he says, "Hey, have you seen my servant Job? There's no one else like him. He's blameless, He loves me with all his heart. He avoids evil. This guy has real integrity. Even though you're always trying to turn me against him and destroy him for no reason. And Satan responds, you want to bet? Look what you've done for that guy. He's got 10 healthy children. He has more wealth than anybody could spend in 20 lifetimes with sheep and camels and donkeys and servants and oxen. Nobody can even count them anymore. Of course he thinks you're wonderful. What more could he ever want from you? Satan says, come on, God doesn't love you. He only loves the blessings. The only reason he doesn't break your laws is because he's afraid of losing some privileges if he gets you mad. He's just in it for what he can get out of you. Satan says, I'll bet you if Job loses those things, that guy will drop his faith like a used Kleenex. That's my loose translation of the Hebrew. He says, you take away the things that he loves, and I'll bet you that guy will curse you to your face. It's not all about you, God. He's just one more selfish guy looking out for himself. I dare you to take it all away from him. And God says, I'm not taking anything away from him. But you can't win that bet. I'm not going to interfere if you take his possessions, but you are not allowed to touch him. Satan says, the bet is on. Out of nowhere, 3 separate raids by organized gangs took all of Job's 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, killed all of his servants except for the one who ran to Job with the news, left him with nothing. What was Satan allowed to touch? Property only. But that wasn't winning the bet, so Satan took it a step further. All of Job's children were under the roof having a banquet when a whirlwind flew in from the desert, collapsed the house, killing all 10 of his kids, his entire family. Can you imagine the devastating loss on loss on loss? Job went into deep mourning. And even in his grief, he said, I came into the world with nothing, and I'm going to leave this world with nothing. May the name of the Lord be blessed. God and Satan have another conversation, and God says, you lose. My servant Job, after everything you've done to him, what I permitted and what I did not permit, he's still blameless. Job still doesn't think that he's entitled. Job is still a man of integrity. You're wrong, and you lose. Satan says, you want to bet? I took his wealth. I took his children. But he can build wealth again, and he can have more children. But you let me go after his health, and you watch what happens. Job will curse you to your face if I attack his flesh and bones. God says, Job will not fail me even if you do that, but you're not allowed to kill him. Fast forward. And now Job is covered with oozing sores from the top of his head all the way down to the soles of his feet. He's sitting in the ash pit, which makes sense because ashes have an antibacterial component. And all he has is a piece of broken pottery that he's using just to scrape his skin and get some relief. This once great man is reduced to this. And as if it could get any worse, as if Satan could add more misery to his pain, the wife that Job had married, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish and to be faithful to you alone, Now that the money's gone, and his looks are gone, and the children are gone, she doesn't see any reason to keep him around. He's poor, he's ugly, he's useless, she says to him. Just curse God and die already so I can get on with my life. And Job answers. He says, I loved God when my life was good. Why should I stop loving God when my life is terrible? And it says, he didn't sin with his lips. And when bad things happen and we wonder, why him? Why them? Why me? What did I do to deserve this? Your people automatically default to two pat answers, to two easy answers, to two obvious answers that are right enough of the time to sound right, but they're not always right. And the first is, well, they must have done something to bring that on themselves. Lung cancer, they smoked, right? Or you think, I must have done something to offend God, so if I just go to church more, maybe I'll get better treatment. And the book of Proverbs and common sense back that up to an extent. You know, Proverbs will tell you, if you live wisely, if you work hard, if you keep your word, if you're faithful to your spouse, if you stay out of debt, you can avoid a whole lot of trouble and probably live a much better life. Is that true? Yeah, generally. And if you're lazy, dishonest, unfaithful, and don't mind your own business, you're heading for trouble. Is that generally true? Generally speaking. Is it always true? So if I'm doing the right things and I'm going to live a good life, then if things go wrong, I must have done something, or you must have done something to deserve it. And the name for that is moralism. If I'm a good girl, good things will happen to me. If I'm a bad girl, bad things will happen to me. All 12-year-olds are moralists. If you give one a piece of pie that is that much bigger than the other, they will tell you that's not fair. But in this instance, we know Job had not done anything wrong. So then what? The other pat answer is there is no meaning. You're born. You compete for resources. You die. And if there is a God, God either doesn't care, or God isn't paying attention, or God is a fairy tale that people tell to get other people to obey the rules, but there's no point being good because your good behavior doesn't get you anywhere. And the name for that pat answer is cynicism. We're living in an age of cynicism. Nothing really matters. And the book of Job is telling us that moralism and cynicism do not explain the world the way it is. First, we see that there are forces in this world that are hostile to humanity and all creation and in rebellion against God. Sin has broken the world so badly that we can't say justice already happens. People say, well, why would God create a broken world? Well, that's like saying, if that chair is broken, why would the church buy that broken chair? It wasn't broken when we got it. It wasn't broken when it left the factory. But somebody's broken it since. And that's the world we're living in. But we know that from the beginning that God always has the last word and God determines the end of the story. And we know that God and evil are not equals. God is clearly in charge at the end. And we have that confirmed by Christ's victory over death on the cross. So first theme is that the world is broken. Second theme, and I've read the story of Job dozens of times. I've never seen this before. Tim Keller brought it to my attention. It's Satan's accusation that tells us what's going on in this story. Satan's accusation, Job doesn't love you. Job only loves what you do for him. When I was in public school, grade 1, a boy moved in. I can't remember the European country, but he didn't speak any English. You know, public school kids can be mean, right? So this poor kid who didn't speak any English, he didn't have any friends until he started bringing candy to school. And then everybody wanted to be his friend. And then he stopped bringing candy to school. And then nobody wanted to be his friend. I once had a couple come into a congregation and they wanted to start a small group in their house, and we were doing small group ministry at the time. I thought, what a great idea. And then I found out that he was having small groups and they were recruiting them into his multi-level marketing business. I thought, I'm kind of uncomfortable with that. And then they invited the whole congregation to their wedding. I thought, that's very generous. And then beside each plate was a sign-up form for sales into the he'd written the whole thing off as a business expense on his income tax. And I had the unhappy job of asking him to stop and telling him that he couldn't do that. Because in a church, if somebody's interested in being your friend, you want to know that they see you as someone they're interested in being their friend, not as the next step in building their business. Do you know what I'm saying? They left the church because we wouldn't let them do that. Question is, why are you doing good works and avoiding doing wrong? Is it for you so that God will give you what you want? Or have you experienced the love, the grace, the forgiveness of Christ himself? And someone told me, you can't tell people that, because if you don't make people a little bit afraid of the consequences, they won't behave. In the 90s, there was a play doing the rounds of some churches. It was Heaven's Gate, Hell's Doors, or Hell's Doors, Heaven's Gate, something like, I don't suppose, it was an interactive play that was supposed to walk you through the doors of hell and make you very, very afraid and definitely not want to go there. But a person who is motivated by fear and does the right thing is an entirely different human being than one who does what they do because they love the one that they're doing it for. Is it for you so that God will give you what you want, or have you experienced the love, the grace, the forgiveness of Christ for himself? Like, what if you don't get what you want? Would you turn your back on God? I think I told you, in Saskatoon, I saw somebody toss God out of their life because they got a speeding ticket on the way to church. And I mean, I asked a stupid question, were you speeding? And he was speeding. But he figured if God was on his side, he would have fixed the ticket. Well, you can laugh. But you know, there are times when you're praying for something that is very, very right and you want it very, very much. Where are you if you don't get the answer that you were hoping for? See, it's hard for us to accept that Christ's love for you is not based on your performance. That's why it's grace. And grace will take us to the place where our love for God is not based on what we perceive as God's performance. You can't make Jesus love you more or less than you are loved already. I've seen people endure every indignity and loss with grace and strength and faith and love and hope. I mean, anyone who says that Jesus is a crutch for the weak has no concept of real strength and real beauty. I can tell you there's a lot of it in this room. And you can bet on that, and you'll win.